Hello, I'm Ronnie Eldridge. Welcome to Eldridge and Company. An award-winning journalist, producer, and advocate, Carol Jenkins is now the host of Black America, a new series broadcast on this station. She's an awesome woman I've admired for many years, and she's my guest today. Welcome.
Thank you so much. It's so great to see you, Ronnie.
Oh, it's terrific. But I have watched you for, I don't want to say how long, because then it's a little,
It gets into the big numbers, right?
I know. And I get excited when I think we're colleagues, because,
Yes. Right.
I'm an amateur and you're this great professional.
No. I've been watching you for not a zillion years. You've only been doing it for a dozen, right?
Right. All right, enough of our back and forth.
And you're fantastic.
This is an interesting year for discussions about race. I mean, it's also mixed up. It's race, sex, class, everything, right?
Right.
Do you think it's a moment that's changing things?
I do. I think many people feel that last year, and it's carrying on to this year, but last year was so tumultuous with so many things happening, and with the creation, if you can believe it, of the hashtag Black Lives Matter, something, who knew about hashtags 5 years
Right.
ago, and that Black Lives Matter would become a clarion call for action. And I think that what we're seeing is that it is possible to get things done. Mm-hmm. Perhaps not in the old-fashioned way of voting and working through the system, but simply, as many of the young people are showing us, taking to the streets and saying, this doesn't work, this isn't right, and it's got to change. And so we saw these groups of students and groups of young activists getting police chiefs to step down, college presidents to step down, and working to get the names of racist former presidents off of buildings. So I think that it's so exciting to me as a relatively ancient person to see the action, the activity, the progress being made.
It's also placed a movement. It's not different. It's on top instead of almost asking or forcing. I mean, they're telling us.
Precisely.
But it's the young people again, isn't it?
It's young, but it is really what's so interesting about it is that it started as young, but now it's seeped up, so that you find people who've been working the systems, academics, writers, who get it, who understand. I mean, even an actor, a woman by the name of Tanya Pinkins, who cited Black Lives Matter when she refused a role because it didn't fit into what she felt was appropriate as a Black woman character. So it's felt, and we're having her on Black America as well to talk about that. So I think it may have started young, but I think it's throughout the fabric of society now, not only Black society, but society, period, where people are drawing the line and saying, sorry, we've argued about this for decades and decades, and now it's time to get something done.
Do you think the same thing is going to happen with the disparity in wealth?
Well, that is, we had Darren Walker, the president of the Ford Foundation, as our first guest, because he has tilted the entire foundation towards ending inequality, which I always say, good luck with that, but we admire the effort. But he's got $500 million a year that he can place in where he thinks the most effect will take place. That's such a hard thing, but as you see how he's broken down the issues that are blocking us, one of them, which I think is so interesting because of the work that we do, is the narrative that's told about people in the media, in literature, everywhere, of what people are like and how that has to be fixed before things like equal pay and equal access to jobs and all of that can be fixed. So there's a huge amount of work that just needs to be done to declare that people are competent and can work, can get an education, should get an education, and should be paid the same amount of money for the same amount of work, not only women, but people of color. So I think that wealth disparity, but it's not just wealth, it's everything that has to be fixed.
But he's really educating and underneath it. Then you got Bernie Sanders basically on top of it.
Right.
And again, young people who are really fed up, I guess, with what they see is going to be their future.
Yeah. No, I support Hillary.
Yeah.
And now that I'm not a reporter anymore, I can do
say
that.
it. What a relief.
Right. But I understand the enthusiasm for Bernie Sanders and what he's talking about. And that's that, 99% of the people in this country who are not enjoying the extraordinary wealth. And as I was walking around Manhattan today and watching these enormous buildings going up, these 100-story buildings of, $1 million apartments, and you think, right, who's living there? And where are the what I call the real people going to live when all of this is done? So
at the same time, you read about 3 families living together in a 2-room apartment, or workers that have come here that are living 5 in a room. So it's this whole incredible disparity. But Sanders is looking to the future and just saying enough of this also, in a funny way.
Right, yeah. And I think that, and I love that it's a 70-plus-year-old man.
Yes, right.
With all of these young followers, who
it is
who are hopeful.
Yeah.
I think that's great, and I think, as Hillary has said, getting that energy going is just phenomenal. So I think he's doing a terrific job.
So it's basically, it seems to me, it's starting with an energized younger population that no longer sees the same difference in race, in sexual orientation, in any of those things. They're much more tolerant, I think, aren't they?
Well, I think we as a country we've moved through the big Supreme Court decisions. So it's life has become much more equal, even though we're
forced to see it that way.
Right. So I think it's the young people, but I think it's everybody. Even though we're living, I've always looked at our society when we talk about we're totally integrated, or we are more integrated in the workplace, but we're still residentially, when we go home, pretty much segregated. There is still that everybody goes back to their camp, so to speak, and then they come together 9 to 5, and then they go back. Because when you look at social gatherings and conferences, and you would be amazed that you could still, in 2016, go to something happening and it be completely white or completely black or completely Asian or completely Native American, Latino, that we still are reverting to our pockets of, I suppose, comfort, but also...
And economically, I mean, when you talk about neighborhoods are still segregated, and then as white people move in because housing's too expensive in other neighborhoods, and this is where you get a good deal, then they move in, it becomes gentrified, and people who can't afford it move out, and it's a very complicated phenomena, the whole thing.
We talked to Darren Walker about that because he was at the Abyssinian Development Corporation earlier in his career, where the church expanded into development of housing and businesses and all of that. And then, of course, what's happened in Harlem is that it's hard to find a black person. No, that's an exaggeration.
Almost.
That's but truly, it is becoming totally gentrified.
So you've noticed the change in your life, or has it come gradually in the environment around you?
The change in my life, let's see. Well, personally, in my family structure, here's the change. I am the grandmother of 3 biracial children who of a same-sex couple. My daughter and her partner are raising these 3 wonderful children. I co-grandparent with conservative Republican grandparents, who are wonderful, by the way, love their grandchildren. So whenever we have a family gathering, I'm a radical feminist, the conservatives, the white, the black, the same sex. I mean, extraordinary. So that's what is possible to have happen. So that's my experience, where I see that we are becoming a blended society, or can become a blended society, and it can work. So extraordinary differences. I'm from Lowndes County, Alabama, and grew up on a farm in rural Alabama, where segregation was the rule, and so for my lifetime to go from that to, here's all of this, it's wonderful.
I have the same experience with my grandchildren. I mean, I tell them, when I was at college, we used to have a trip every year to Washington, a government class. And one year, one of us was African American. And it turned out that we couldn't stay in the same hotel because Washington was still segregated. We couldn't even stay at the Y. I tell that to my grandchildren, and they really think this is incredible. Or I tried to tell one of them who's studying Americans something or other that we adopted a town in Mississippi during the COFO times, that was in the 60s.
Right.
And I became friendly with the sheriff because I was always talking to him when they arrested people to be sure that the kids were safe. That was the summer college students all went to. And she's at college, and her best friend is African American, and she has another very good friend who is Asian. And then she has another good friend who's trans. She's transing.
Right.
And the whole thing is so different.
Right, right. It requires some flexibility on our part as the ancients. But
so that's really hopeful.
Yes, oh, absolutely. And the fact, even in film and in media, where it's so important because this is the narrative that Darren Walker is talking about. Who do we see? What are the stories that we deem are important to know? And the fact that the people who are transitioning, are, I think, one of them won a really significant acting award, which was fantastic. And I'm sure you want to talk about Oscar So White.
I thought that was very interesting, don't you?
Yes, yes.
I was very impressed, actually, with Chris Rock. I remember once talking to him at the garage. We were both waiting for the car.
Right.
But, I mean, I thought his introduction kind of thing was very...
Well, it may have been a little bit drawn out, I
Yeah.
think having your grandmother hang
that was quite
from
a sentence,
tree
wasn't it?
We couldn't lynched is.
Yeah. We
it's
couldn't
hard-
do things like this in those days because we were too busy worrying about our grandmother. All right.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I thought
Exaggerate.
I don't know, and I'm the wrong person to ask because I have the worst sense of humor. But I wasn't. I've understood what he was trying to do, but I didn't quite find it funny, because in many instances
Too real. Was it too real?
Well,
Or was
that
it
those
too
things were going on
exaggerated?
then, but I think he misunderstood about what's going on now and the fact that people are still being slaughtered in the streets, sometimes by police, sometimes by each other. So I don't think we've traveled quite that far, but I did understand the comedic device that he was trying to use.
He was in a pretty tough position.
Right. That's true. But I watched that night the Ava DuVernay and Ryan Coogler, their benefit for Flint, Michigan. They were there. They did an alternative because they were both black directors who had been not included or considered for awards and really deserved them, I think. Yeah. So there may have been some who didn't deserve it, but in those two instances, last year or this year, they deserved it. They raised money for the residents of Flint, Michigan, and did a 5-hour alternative programming. They said not on purpose; that was just the timing, but it was wonderful.
Well, and just the fact of Flint, Michigan, that's another thing. I mean, things like that have gone on forever. Roads have been bad. Everything in black communities has been less than in white communities. But here was such a obvious thing that
of environmental racism.
And the country
racism,
really,
yes.
I think, really rallied in support of it.
Right, and then what we have to do is to pay attention to all of the other places like that, right here in New Jersey, where there are towns where that's happening. But that's
And where we cite things, where we always do things, the choice of who gets what part of it.
Precisely. So I think the fact that, they say that Black Lives Matter, but I think it means more than just Black lives, even though there's a huge argument to be had when people say all lives. But I think what Black Lives Matter means is that people who are disenfranchised, who do not have rights, who are not getting the same kind of attention that other people need and get, or the same justice.
In a way, that's where the class and economics comes to play also.
Right.
So we're going to eventually combine it all. I think the one place that we haven't seen and still struggle tremendously with is education. Public schools. Why can't we ever get past that?
I know. It's, and we're interviewing the young Black woman who is a finalist for National Teacher of the Year, who has worked in a very tough urban setting in Connecticut. And she came up, her story is so wonderful. She came up living in public housing, having a child when she was a teenager, working as a nurse's aide, and then going back to college and pulling herself together, and then demonstrating that even if you do make a detour, you can get back on track and become very, very successful. And she is very effective with her students because she looks like them. She's had the same kind of experiences of not having enough food, of having. She says that one of her teachers said, "Oh, her family doesn't care about her because they never come to the parent-teachers meeting," when in fact there was no bus route to get her grandmother to the school to get there, and they couldn't afford a car, a taxi, or whatever. So I think that being able to get people of color back in the classrooms as teachers, as examples, has to be placed as a very, very high priority, because some of the statistics seem to suggest that if a child has a teacher who looks like them, they will actually do better. And it's so shocking it's shocking to me that that's absolutely true. But I think we have to look at that kind of the teaching, replacing teachers, replacing administration, and that maybe is where it has to happen, as opposed to what do we do with these children who are acting out,
or just what do we do with the Board of Education that isn't doing what it should be doing.
Right.
It's such the question of resiliency. Here's the young woman that you recited. Mm-hmm. Why does she do so much better than the girl next door who wasn't able to do the same thing?
Because she had someone who intervened, who mentored, who was an example to her. And I think that's what, when we start our show, that's the first question we ask. Where are you in this country, and of Black America? Where did you grow up? Yeah. Who were the influences? Yeah. Who changed your life?
I like to ask that too.
Yeah, and in every,
you see it
in almost every instance, somebody
right?
has stepped in, and I think that's what it may be too much to be asking for the public school system or the school systems to do that, but someone has to do it.
We need community mentors and community something, right?
Right.
And then, of course, I think one of the biggest changes, and I guess a change in consciousness, although there are some questions about it, is criminal justice. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And how totally racist the system is.
Right.
And what are we ever going to do about it?
Right. Well,
and interesting enough, it's together, we talk about this collaboration. It's people who don't want to spend as much money, and it's other people who worry about the unfairness and the injustice in the system.
Well, we have a huge mass incarceration problem, but I come down on the side that a lot of those people who are in jail should not be there, and many of them shouldn't have been there in the first place. Right. Many people of color who are there, did less than what white people did. Black. So we know that there's the discrepancy. A black person committing a crime versus a white person committing a crime. 20 years to life, a probation, or we have those examples. So I think that the steps to decriminalize. The drug laws are just horrendous, to do that, and to lessen the sentences, pardon people, shut down, the money-making. It's a frank business.
It's an industry. It's a
money-making piece of it.
It's an industrial complex. It really is.
Right. So
not only are we contracting out, but in the communities where we site prisons, and again, talk about environmental justice or something, we site these prisons in isolated places that make it even harder for people to come in. But it's the whole justice system. It's the people who are caught up because they violated parole or who had a warrant and didn't respond to it. And finally, I think everybody is talking about these different steps in the system and hopefully to change it.
Right, right. Well, the last time I was called to jury duty, which was a drug case, there were hundreds of people sitting in waiting to be selected as jurors. We were told that we would hear from 20 or 30 police officers who had staked out this guy, and here's this guy sitting at the, and because I knew that it was a mandatory sentence, there would be no, you need to step back and say, I can't participate in it. Well, I left Alabama when I was young, so I actually grew up in New York, in Queens, and went to public school there. But we were 18 children, 9 girls, 6 boys, and all of the girls were, I always describe us as a feminist family. All of the girls went to college, and the boys were expected to stay and take care of the farm.
Isn't that interesting?
So that, and then we were lucky enough to have a head of family, one of my aunts, who was then ultimately married a very wealthy man, who then...
Oh, that's good.
I know, who then... In fact, my daughter and I wrote a book about him, A.G. Gaston, who owned the motel in Birmingham when Martin Luther King was desegregating the department stores there. So that so I was able to,
and
along with my
generous to all the family.
My aunt was. The way she did it was by giving us all savings bonds. I don't know whether you remember that.
Oh, sure.
And then she did it for the next generation too. So I have 40 plus first cousins, and then all of our children who got these savings bonds that most people derided. But then my daughter says, that's how I bought my college books, and whatever. So that it was, she was a heavy influence, and not that they were. My aunt would sew skirts for me when I went to college, and she would help all of our parents out if we were not able to meet the tuition and whatever. But she would whip up, I didn't have a wardrobe, she would whip up 20 cotton skirts and send me off in my freshman year.
Yeah. And then how did you get into this career you have?
Well, I went to Boston University and then NYU, and sort of went through the various careers, and then decided that I wanted to be a journalist. And after I had my master's, started as a secretary at CBS.
I did too.
Right. So it proves. There you go. And then worked my way up. Started, with a 1-week contract on a local station, and then I had a 13-week contract, and then 30 years later, I, bowed out to do some other things. So,
you've always been very committed and a strong advocate for more women and people of color in the business, and I guess all over in the advertising business and everything. There has been a great improvement, hasn't there? Are you pleased with the results, or is there still much to do?
Well, I think there's much to do. I think the questions we have to ask now we have Lester Holt anchoring the NBC Nightly News.
And doing such a good job.
Which is fantastic.
Yeah.
That wasn't precisely on purpose, but nevertheless, he's there. But then you have to look around and say, exactly how many executives. I think ABC has hired its first president, black woman, which is a great move. But we're still in these sort of singular, the first, the only, and that's not a good scene. The newsrooms, even though there's progress, there's always this sort of sliding back, So when the cuts come, it's always the newer, often the people of color who are lost from the newsroom. Melissa Harris Perry, who had 4 hours of television on MSNBC, is recently no longer there. So that's 4 hours of really diverse experts that she was able to bring to the table, and I think that's a big loss. A lot of really stealth drawback that it's hard to really say, hey, wait a minute, what's happening to all the people of color?
It's a move ahead and back.
Right. So I would say that certainly, because I was not the first wave, but sort of 1.5 waves back of people of color being brought into the news industry, much better than that, but still not anywhere near where we'd want it to be.
Is it important, not only because it looks different, but because people from these different backgrounds have different perspectives of the news, or different perspectives about what's important?
Well, that may be true, but I think it's just a fair. It's equity. It's how can you say that that black people or Latino or Asian people are not qualified to do any of these jobs, So
I
why
see.
is there the discrepancy?
Okay,
It's
yeah.
not even so much, oh, I'll have a wildly different perspective. I may, but I may not. But I still need to be in the newsroom. I still need to be in the seat. I still need to be making movies. I still need to be writing books. I still need to be reviewing
I'm
books.
as good as this person. We're all the same.
We're all-
They used to say the assignment editor was the most important thing, because the assignment editor used to pick the stories.
Right. Well, those were the old days when we actually had stories.
Oh, come on. Yeah.
As we know, the news business is vastly different
yeah.
now. And 24-hour cable has changed it because it's no longer story per se, it's talking head. And so you want to make sure that there are as many diverse talking heads. And as Whoopi Goldberg, I think, said the other night at the Oscars, people of color have a right to protest, but I really think the Asians have more of a reason to protest than, not that we want to get into a contest or anything, but if you look at how many Asian anchors, a very good friend of mine who is a terrific anchor has not been able to get a steady position, on the network as well. So we have to look at the broad spectrum. We're talking about people of color. We're talking about the disenfranchised. And I honestly, say when you say Black Lives Matter, there are many people who are black who are not black, if you get my point. So they're the ones who are not being given justice and a fair opportunity.
Well, this is almost a good way to end this program. We've already been on a half hour. But the challenge, as we become more and more of this place where people from all backgrounds and all countries come and merge, the challenge gets even greater, doesn't it?
It does. But it's such a I feel that we're at the tipping point. I think that this year will really clear the air because we have such stark realities of what's at work in this country, that there are a lot of angry people who are full of hate, and there are a lot of people who want to make progress and who are willing to fight for it. And I think that, that's how you get it done. You have to recognize the problem, that it's not just a few people, that there's a sea of people who are not interested in seeing equal justice, equal opportunity in this country. And once you realize that, then you can act against it.
You know what you're up against.
You know what you're up against.
Well, thank you so much, Carol, and thank you, and good luck with your program.
Thank you,
And what
Roddy.
time does it air?
Well, I always send people to the website. It's CUNY.tv
Public Affairs.
show
Oh,
/ Black America. You can watch it online, worldwide, as we say.
That's so good. Thank you very much, and lots of good luck.
Thank
to
you, Roddy.
Thank you. If there are any people you'd like to hear or topics you'd like us to explore, please let me know. You can write to me at CUNY TV, 365 Fifth Avenue, New York, New York, 10016. Or you can go to the website at CUNY.tv and click on Contact Us. I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.